2019 special permit.
Yeah. So
Salisbury Street.
for this special permit for to Salisbury, due to other time constraints, I wasn't able to finish that decision. So we'll review that at the next meeting.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the temporary signs now, or do you want to get other
We could
things
take care of then general business items and then go
Yeah.
back up to that.
Yeah. All right, bills circulated down that way. I think
Next year, tell me
we
what
need
it
to
is
come
inside.
back this way. Staff report.
Okay, so things are extremely busy in the department right now. Not only in coordinating peer reviews for some of the major projects that we have, we're also dealing with a couple of big ticket items that taken some time away from other items. Staff is continuing to work with town council on a lawsuit and appeal of the Sutton Planning Board special permit for the condo development that impacted open space that's within the town of Grafton. So there's been a lot of discussions with town council and reviewing documents in preparation of court. Another thing is working feverishly with DCAM on two items. One, making sure that all the documents for closing on the 8 Pine Street property, the Grafton State Hospital property, are finalized, including coordinating all the signatures. That packet has been sent off to DCAM, and we received by email today the final drafts of the legal documents for Board of Selectmen chair to sign. The Board of Selectmen had already reviewed the draft material, so we're just awaiting signature. Once we get that signature, we'll then have that official closing date for the Grafton State Hospital property. Also had been working with the engineering firm Gary Hellnon as far as the Institute Road layout and making sure that they actually submitted what they needed to do for the warrant for special town meeting with an annual town meeting. So that's been finalized. There was a lot of last minute scrambling on our end, DCAM's end, and their end to make sure that what the attorneys for DCAM wanted was actually on the plans. So that's on the warrant. The application and plans and legal descriptions have been submitted to the Board of Selectmen. They're looking at either the 16th or the following week in April for their layout hearing. Some other things I'm going through.
Can I ask?
Sure.
What are they doing? Redoing the layout of Institute Road?
So back when Village of Institute came before the planning board, or back up even further, when Village Institute was first a planner ago in front of the board, there was a question as far as whether or not Institute was really a town road. They negotiated going to land court to get a determination that yes, Institute Road is a town road. However, as part of that court decision, they never established a right-of-way. They never established dimensions. So as we were going through that special permit and definitive subdivision process, we had basically negotiated out what that right-of-way looks like with DCAM and where rather than a 50-foot, getting a 60-foot, so that we're making sure that we're future-proofing Institute Road. And then GNH was given the marching orders to prepare that and then prepare the documents. And of course, it takes time for DCAM legal to go through and back and forth. And then you have with GNH staff changes. Norm Gamache is no longer, he's retired. So now you're bringing everyone forward, trying to educate them and tell them
Right.
why we need this. So
Yeah.
took a little bit longer, but we've got it right there at almost at the strike of midnight for the warrant to get it in, because otherwise Afonso would have to negotiate with DCAM and come with a separate agreement, because then we wouldn't be able to consider this until fall. I've also been involved in some negotiations regarding appeal of Prentice Place, and the 40B that was approved by the ZBA, but the approval is one of those things that the units were cut down significantly. So they appealed. So I've been involved with negotiating some sort of settlement. Also involved with High Point. So because we don't have Rachel or Maria, I try to drive by a lot of the development projects to make sure that they're not washing away. And because with 40Bs, the ZBA is the permit granting authority, the developer of High Point wants to have his development accepted as a town road. So that process, I'm assisting the ZBA in defining what that process is and making sure that they have all those deliverables and making sure that the ZBA acts as the planning board in that.
Yeah, I'm interested in that.
There'll be plenty
The,
of meetings at
you-
some
you-
point.
You know my point.
Yes, I do know your point.
40B says, basically, the town has to let them build, and override our, among other things, our standards for roads, road construction. I don't think 40B says the town has to accept the roads as public ways.
Correct. Correct.
And I think that point should be made aware of. People should realize that. Having been totally involved in that thing since
Yep.
the beginning.
So I've also been involved with the Adams Road. If anyone's seen the Board of Selectmen meeting, so I'm assisting behind the scenes on that, as well as an assistance trying to get things going on the Main Street project. You may have seen on Facebook I did a posting, just waiting to be able to get things actually on the web page for the project. Some illustrations as far as what the new configuration or proposed configuration could look like. I personally think it is an improvement. I haven't gotten any feedback that it isn't. I believe at the last meeting, it was presented at the Board of Selectmen meeting when VHB was here for other items. If any of you on social media platforms have heard anything differently, I'd love to know. I haven't had any complaints at my window or by email, so hopefully as we go forward that can be at least viewed as addressing some of the comments that were raised.
I was interested, I expected to see more than I did on the little I see on social media. I am curious, we're not going to get into it, I'm sure, at this point, but I'm really curious about the situation on Adams Road and how it got where it is and, what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
We did approve the subdivision that those houses are part of, so we did have a hand in it.
Yeah, basically just the crux of it, and this is what, if you saw the meeting, town council was there, Ginny Kramer, talking about that there are things within the special permit that were not complied with, i.e. prior to the issuance of a building permit, the developer coming back to review drainage and stormwater infrastructure as part of those lot developments for compliance with relevant regulations. I find no record that was even done. I don't see anything on agendas, nothing in the hard files. Also contacted Graves. I see nothing. Graves had no indication outside of the initial review and then separate conservation reviews of nothing coming back under that context as far as prior to the issuance of a building permit. So that's where there's a lot of things, and you think about that project, you actually are going across 4 different planners at that time, if you include me on this tail end, and then when it was first, the first conception of that project. So it's gone on for multiple staffs, and a lot of departments, not just planning. So another thing that's going on is that I've gotten about 20 responses for for filling vacancy in the planning office, the joint conservation / planning position. That's taking some time to go through and start to narrow things down. I am working with the CPC secretary to try to get her to come in for some hours for some additional support, websites to, stuff to at least before we get anyone on, just to fulfills some of the tasks that need to be done that don't necessarily can happen without me having to have my hand in it. Another thing, and this is good, it's under the staff report, is that as you mentioned, if it's been mentioned on social media, I believe at a Board of Selectmen meeting, Tim had mentioned that he had been approached by Wyman Gordon, as well as marketing and real estate broker, as far as carving off a portion of Wyman Gordon. I've been providing some support as far as what the zoning bylaw allows, what it doesn't, what the processes may be. There is the potential that as part of the special, might be looking to see if we can rezone a portion of the property 43D. So the zoning doesn't change, but just the expedited permitting. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but that is something that possibly could. Coming up in another Friday, there looks like there may even be a company that's interested in a life science type company that's interested in a portion of it. So life science is allowed in the office light industrial and industrial districts. So it's something that is really sort of interesting, because I think out of anything in town, we knew at some point we'd have to deal with it. And I think probably some of the macroeconomic stuff that's going on, including sale of Wyman Gordon's property in Worcester now for Polar Park, maybe is having them revisit some of their land holdings. So that's something that I'm sure we'll be communicating more often.
So probably that doesn't implicate anything with what we're doing with VMU down the road a little bit.
When you have a larger broker, what they're probably doing is then identifying here's basically a lot of the attributes of the community, a lot of the things as far as time, sort of a journey to site type analysis, identifying zoning from a retail, from office industrial perspective. The EDC is undertaking a study right now, a feasibility study for a hotel. That's not the principal site they were looking at, something more Centec Park, closer to commuter rail station and Tufts, but they'd look at other areas in town and closer to highway and major road access. So there's a lot of focus going on in that avenue. Keep going. I'm working with John Allen on doing a commuter rail survey. Was working with him on putting together a questionnaire to do by SurveyMonkey, and to survey users of the commuter rail lot to try to identify commuting patterns, where they're sort of coming from, just from a zip code, get an idea as far as their experience, what kind of amenities, if they were nearby, would they be interested in getting. So that's something that John's spearheading, and I'm just providing some support on that. Just met with Jean Poteet. They're interested in trying to move forward with some of the recommendations of the Transit Village Plan. Every quarter or every 3 months, there's a Grafton Community, I always forget what the GCAC stands for, but that committee that was set up when the Bio 3 lab was put in, meets quite regularly, and Tufts and JLL, their broker, was interested in taking some of the recommendations and seeing what could happen. So I told her that let the planning board get through town meeting first, and then maybe come in and we can have a discussion with her as far as what could be viewed as trying to implement some of that plan. One of the things that was sort of thrown out there was maybe reevaluating some of the uses allowed up front to allow it more as a either a retail, things that are more community facing rather than supportive of the educational mission or life sciences. So they want to have that discussion with the planning board once we're on the other side of town meeting. To say that, to sort of go on to the next bullet item, to say that the town is solidly on the radar of marijuana companies would be a understatement. I'm getting like weekly inquiries, meeting with them and development team. I'm expecting at some point something actually is gonna again appear before the Board of Selectmen with people looking at a few properties. This is for grow/retail facilities primarily in the Route 30 corridor, still Centec Park. But right now, outside of someone associated with Nature's Remedy meeting with the Board of Selectmen about a month and a half ago, nothing has really moved forward, though there are some very interesting and what appear to be very professional proposals that are coming forward. Continuing to work with DPW, they have their consultant doing some of the final engineering with for the sewer line for the MassWorks. Today we met with Dominic Alfonso with Institute Road to discuss his portion and how to tie in and timeframes for that. And that is probably just some of the stuff I'm dealing with right now. So it's a very busy time.
I think that's the good news, isn't it?
Yes, I mean we are not twiddling our thumbs, but one of the priorities is getting someone in the position to be able to provide some support. So that's where I'm trying to spend as much time going through and narrowing things down, because as we're coming out of the winter and as site work starts picking up, but before ground starts stabilizing with grass, this is a very sensitive time. So I have like Russo Brothers looking for final sign-offs. Same thing with Colorio, Dimitri Delights, and doing site visits to make sure that they're in conformance with ours, but then also working with Leah in the conservation office to make sure that they're also in line with conservation's requirements. Just on that, I did actually get a tour of Dimitri Delights, and John Colorio, the owner, showed myself as well as the engineer that was there. His engineer gave a tour of the place, and that is an amazing facility. Just to see what they do, it's actually really amazing. They do all contract work. Nothing is coming under Dimitri Delights. They work with grocery stores all over Northeast, even down as far as North Carolina. And I was really impressed. That's one of those things I don't think a lot of Grafton residents really know, really what kind of business is going on right on Creeper Hill, but it really is amazing.
Sounds like there ought to be a GCTV.
There should, I think there should be, although all cell phones had to be left in the office and all that stuff because there's proprietary equipment and all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
But it really, we were thinking of it as far as we know that they're a bakery and all that stuff and they're doing an expansion, but to see things actually running, it's amazing. And he was telling myself and the engineer how basically started by quitting GE and then just starting making spinach pies in his kitchen, and then to what they do. It was truly amazing.
Because as you drive by, you don't have.
No, you don't. But you could get out and it's like, okay, this is a good smell.
Yeah.
Versus down the street at the other place.
Actually, it
So-
doesn't really have much smell for most of the time, though. I drive Creeper Hill a lot.
Well, it might have been I had to get out and actually
Yeah.
start walking that then you noticed it.
Yeah, they
So,
call me a trespasser.
Okay.
So.
So, that's it?
Yep.
Anything more from you? all.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. I did get a revised open space plan. I'm going to be contacting the open space committee to try to set up something end of April so I can distribute it and set up a meeting for that. That is the one thing that I did forget to mention.
Okay, that brings us to minutes of previous meetings, I guess February 25th.
Yeah, so if you can just refer to the printed out version, one online is the former version. We department got comments from Sharon just before the meeting, so we Natalia I think did a good job incorporating that. The only thing that probably changes rather than plot, say property, but and I think I said also like in from the where was I? I just want to see yours for a quick second because I changed it on the server, but I don't want to go searching for it. From the proposed zoning map. That would be the only thing that I'd add to the end of that.
Okay,
Oh, it's good, thank you.
Yep.
anything else? Do we have a motion?
Move the minutes of February 25th be approved as distributed for our review this evening.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted unanimously. Taking us to correspondence. Is there any correspondence that anyone wants to talk about?
So the only thing really as far as correspondence and understand that it was a delay, there was questions as far as some of the scope of work with the village, the Institute Woods pedestrian and recreation trail. Those were refined. Contract had to be because of the amount signed by the Board of Selectmen. What you have is a copy of the executed contract. They'll be able to start coming in shortly and start doing that work.
Emergency management was looking to see as soon as it dries up a little bit more to take the mule vehicle the town has up through there to start to eyeball out some of the potential for emergency evac.
Okay, I don't think it's gonna work well to try to do temporary signs right now. Maybe we can do reports from, planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC. Nothing.
I have nothing to report.
I noticed that, I don't know, maybe we noted it the last time, that the library has announced when they're closing to move to their new
Yeah,
location.
the end of this month.
And they've announced when they're gonna open up there. Something like, it looks like it's 3 weeks or so, a span. Does anybody else have any, reports?
I was unable to attend the last meeting.
Hmm?
I was unable to attend the last meeting.
And the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee hasn't had a meeting for a while, but Joe just promised us that we might have a meeting toward the end of the month. After which maybe there will be something to report back to the board.
Well,
Well, we have 5 minutes.
yeah,
Shall we just
take a break.
sit quietly for 5 minutes?
Meditate. I guess one other thing, just I always like saying when we get grants. I don't like saying, well, one was submitted because then if you say it was submitted and you don't get
You
it,
jinx it.
exactly. So to jinx myself, there was a round through Mass Development for technical assistance that applied for the old DPW site. to basically assist in coming up with a reuse plan. What that would involve is sort of like the what we did for the Worcester Street Village study, public forum to engage officials, residents of the town, some visioning sessions, and then recommendations as far as like how maybe that could be developed or what the best use was. Really want to be able to make sure that we did have a public process, and that while committees such as the EDC would like that to come back on the tax rolls, that may not necessarily be what the town wants, and I think it's important to get that public input and participation, especially because that is a gateway coming from Upton, and the DPW site actually wraps around the white multifamily building that's there and the post office and comes back to the barn. So there's a real opportunity. It's written to really look at it as a gateway project as well as identify what is the potential next life for the DPW site.
Yeah, it's a sizable site, and I think it's well worth exploring all the potential uses. And
So if we are successful, that would be something that would start in July because it's based on a fiscal year.
I think more exciting though was the idea that Wyman Gordon might open up some of that land, because that's really prime land. It's flat, it's fairly dry
In the front.
in the front.
Access
Access, it's got,
could lead to a stoplight, but yeah.
but it's really got a great deal going for it that so little of the land that's still available in town has.
Yeah.
So much of it's bound up with wetlands and with various constraints, and that land isn't. That's really quite an amazing parcel.
Well, the front part, that's true of, but you recall the back of the
Oh, well.
DPW was limited by wetlands. One of the early things to see is a layout of the whole property with where
various things are.
very well,
What's hidden?
various things, yeah.
As I recall, there is some stuff buried on the site.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I thought that was dealt with.
I think it was pretty much resolved. It wasn't removed. I think it was resolved that it was left in place and not considered to be hazardous. That would be the thorium.
Nasty stuff.
Yes, it was a good number of years ago that was in the news for a while.
2 more minutes.
Less. One and a half.
Anything in South Grafton, Joe, as far as development there or the Riverwalk stuff or any of that?
After town meeting, Gene Burnett did ask me about coming in to meet with the planning board to give them an update on that property. That's sort of where things are, at least right now. The petitioner's article for the other mill is gaining quite a fair amount of attention as far as people calling in asking, are they approved yet? Will the planning board is the planning board aware of potential water quality issues and stuff like that? So some of it is just doing some educating as far as, well, what is this step and then what to look forward to. And talking about our experience with looking at some of these same issues when we went through Nature's Remedy as far as permitting.
Would there be any sort of minimum required standards? I mean, I don't know where the status of the building is in regards to building inspector, fire department, things like that, because I know there were tremendous impact coming from there initially. I don't know if it has to meet a certain standard before it can even come forward for a proposal, or
For as long as they're current on taxes, there's nothing that would prevent them from coming forward on the tax and for us for on taxes. I'm sure should zoning be approved, that then we would start having discussions as far as how to handle some of these things and what's involved.
Certainly the potential reuse of an old building rather than just seeing
Yeah.
it decay further than it already has
Yeah.
would be good.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's 7:30.
7:30.
It is time.
Time to, I think we need to read this, don't we?
Yes.
Bob, do you want to let people know that the other one was continued?
The what?
If there's anybody in the audience on the second one?
Yeah, well, because it's on the agenda, I did less than I would have. If anybody's here for the ridings, they've asked for a continuance to the 20th of
Of May.
May
May.
20th.
So should we?
That
close
they're
the
they're
format?
they're still between conservation and planning.
Yeah. So,
Maybe we should
Let's,
yeah.
act on that.
I'll move that the board grant the applicant's written request to continue the hearings to May 20th.
Second.
Moved and seconded discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
And just as far as background, the reason for this is that they just submitted their application to the Conservation Commission. And because of that, there are elements within the planning board's jurisdiction that most likely will change. So if we proceeded with that review of the ridings, we potentially would have to revisit that issue. So the Conservation Commission not only has jurisdiction over areas within 100 feet of wetlands, but then they also have jurisdiction over a stormwater bylaw. That stormwater bylaw would definitely have a potential impact on design elements with the planning board. So in order to give the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and the developer a chance to get on the same page, the applicant requested a continuance to May 20th. They are aware of the election the next day, and that even if necessary, we may need to re-advertise. But at least continuing to May 20th will give them a better chance to identify where they are in the permitting process. Conservation is not, because it's appointed, they're not in the same situation as we are with elected members. So when we do meet on May 20th, we'll have a better idea as far as the condition of their application.
Okay. I think that request just came in the
Last Thursday.
last Thursday.
So we should go on to the next. Do you want to read it?
Please.
Pursuant to sections 1.5.7 and 1.3.3 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, April 8, 2019, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in Conference Room A at the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider the application for a special permit and site plan approval request for an accessory apartment at the property located at 188 Main Street, shown as Grafton Assessor's Map 113, Lot 39. Said property is located in a low-density residential R20 zoning district. The applicant is Anthony LeMay Jr., and the owners are Anthony and Deborah LeMay. Copies of the plan are available for public inspection at the Planning Department Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., or on the Town of Grafton website at www.graftonma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage.
Okay. Anything to start, Joe, before?
I recommend we just turn it over to the applicant to just give a description as far as what is proposed as an accessory apartment.
Yep.
You have to identify yourself.
Anthony LeMay Jr., 180 Main Street, South Grafton. So the property was originally built by my great-grandparents, and it's kind of moved down through the family tree. My father owned it. We bought it. The plan is to add an addition off to the right side of the house for me and my family, renovate the old house, into a 1 bedroom, 1 bath accessory apartment for my father and stepmother for as long as they need it. And then hopefully one day my kids will take over the house and I get to move in there.
Keep it all in the family.
That's right.
So just to sort of give an overview of the site, I brought up just the site plan that was included in the packet. One thing to make note is this is the property that fairly close to the street. There's a cinder block garage that accesses directly to Main Street. Part of this indicates that that existing garage would be removed. And then I have the proposed plans here that then basically identify what would be, as long as it just stays there. Then correct me if I'm wrong, existing is to the left, and then that's where really it's that new portion in the center and to the right that would be built.
Correct.
So it's, I guess, new garage and living space above.
Yes.
Now, I wasn't following real well. Were you saying that the main living area now would be in the new section?
Correct.
Because it looks smaller than the rest of it is.
So the existing house is just under 1,000 square feet.
Oh, okay.
The new construction would be approximately 2,400 square feet, and then we would actually incorporate some of the old house into the new. So the accessory apartment would be about 700 square feet.
The
So that's where-
the accessory apartment is
Correct.
there.
Yep.
The old, basically, it's the old house.
Correct. The back 2 bedrooms of the original house will be kind of reshuffled and incorporated into the new house as a bathroom for the first floor, and what will end up being a shared bedroom that, depending on who has guests over. So if my nieces are staying over and my father's watching them for the weekend, they'll have a place to stay, which will have access to both sides of the house.
I don't have a good visual sense of the place.
I think if you scroll to another set, Joe, it shows.
Farther down, it looks like there's a plan showing, focusing on the accessory apartment.
Yeah,
I might have gone too far.
no, it was originally right here.
Okay.
If you go a little more, it should give you the floor.
Okay, there we
there's
go.
the floor
Okay.
plan.
That's the one I was looking at just now. So that's the original, the current house.
That is what
Remodeled.
it will be remodeled as. Yes.
And as you said, I think the rooms to the backside or at the top of the picture there, those are going to be essentially part of the main house, and then the area to the front is going to be the
Correct.
accessory
So
apartment.
there'll be a hallway that leads to the back of the house, which will have the washer and dryer on the first floor for my father and stepmother. And then there's that shared bedroom also that we both have access to.
Well, Joe, I take it you've looked at this and understand it.
Yes.
And do you think it's consistent? Maybe, I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I think even just seeing sort of in person, sort of like, I think this gives you a better idea. So, adding on and then renovating this into the accessory unit, it still then is considered to be wholly within the structure once everything is permitted. On the staff side, we don't have any issues as far as reviewing with the building inspector as far as compliance with the bylaw. In some ways, especially given the Main Street project, and this is going to help out because of the fact that that garage is there, and actually the sidewalk, I think, in this location shifts a couple feet closer, still within the right of way, but things sort of line up fairly well as far as that Main Street project and then this project as well.
So in that picture, the left part is this left part of my drawing, and we don't really see the current middle part, in that picture.
Correct. So basically, that garage is going to come down,
Yeah,
and the new driveway will go kind of 3/4 of the way through that driveway and encompass the existing, similar to that square.
So you're widening the driveway?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll go from a 1-car basically to a 2-car driveway.
Yeah, pretty much everything about this, other than the accessory apartment use, is all taken care of with the building permit and
Correct.
associated things with the building
Yep.
department.
the thing is that anytime somebody goes outside the envelope of of the existing house, then, you look at, well, you look at what's happening and whether it's, still within the spirit of the law. I'm sure you're aware of our usual condition about, family.
Yep.
And doesn't
Transfer.
transfer with,
Yep.
with the land. There being no public, I don't think there are any public comments, questions from the board. No questions from the board.
Perhaps a motion would be in order to close the public hearing and direct staff to draft a decision based upon the information submitted in the testimony received.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. That was all.
That was an aye, yeah.
Did I?
Was I?
Okay, I thought I heard a no. Unanimously.
I didn't vote against my own second.
Well, you never know. No, I've had cases like, you get the question on the floor in the form you want it, and then you vote no.
I'm not in Congress.
There's nothing wrong with seconding a motion for the purpose of discussion and voting against it.
Okay, so, he'll draft something and hopefully next meeting, when he has lots more free time to get all this done.
With any luck, we will be voting on the decision in 2 weeks and be done with it.
I think it'd be great to see that garage come down.
It is only 16 feet from the road.
Yep. That's why, I mean, it'll help.
How
there.
far is it from the state layout?
It's probably about 8.
Okay,
That used to be a pretty common way to place,
Yeah.
to put garages.
Yeah.
especially if you had a
Back in the
hillside
day.
or something like
Right.
that.
Yep.
Okay, well, good luck.
Thank you, Tony.
We'll be dealing with that shortly.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
See ya.
Yeah, the more challenging part of the project is to get all the work done.
Okay, I think the only thing left is discussion about temporary signs.
So, also want to give you a heads up in case, well, their meeting will be the same night as ours, so, there really wouldn't be the opportunity to sit in on their meeting.
There.
Their
I'm
meeting.
getting to that. EDC is meeting on, April 22nd. They're sort of reviewing things themselves as far as trying to provide a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board as far as like, based on some of the comments we've gotten from some of the businesses, here's some of our thoughts. One of the things that I want to make sure is that as we have an eye towards maybe fall, that we're able to then identify some of the things that maybe, we may want to work on as it relates to those temporary signs. But also, I think it has the potential to become all signs because, like, one of the challenges, and we started that discussion, it now seems like years ago, and it probably was years ago,
8 years ago.
about, like, well, even at least since I've been here, A-frame signs for the temporary, like for special of the day, what to happen, where to have that line. There's a lot of things that then we have to be very careful as far as saying, well, this use you can have it, this use you can't. You're treating, say, uses differently within the same district. At the same time, we don't. So, say a restaurant can have a A-frame sign, but the spa place can't. So the nail special of the day and the sandwich shop of the day.
Fourth finger free.
Exact. Well, yeah. Or so there's a lot of those things that all of a sudden start popping up as far as how do you address that in a bylaw? What type of standard? So, for example, you'll see in the and I'm not gonna to raise it because it's for our next hearing. You'll see that there's an application for a expansion of sign. When we were talking about them, saying, well, why can't you just let everyone have an A-frame sign? It's like, well, in this business there's 10 businesses, so then you have 10 A-frame signs along the frontage. There's people are going to have issues aesthetically. That's going to be an issue, but it could provide a issue as far as visibility and sight. And then we were just talking about, well, what happens if you rationed, like that business, if it has 10, like you can only have 2 at a time. And then it's like, well, how do you meter those out? Well, what happens if you just allow them to have 30 in 30 days? Well, is that over a calendar year? Can you only do it 2 days, and then do it over the course of a year, like 2 days at a time? There's a lot of those things that sort of come up that really sort of just you end up realizing as it relates to signs, you're just a hamster on a wheel, just spinning around and around without really getting any place. So.
That's how we've gotten to where we are on this.
Exactly.
Because that's the problem, figuring out the problem.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
also-
not a
The
silver
problem
bullet.
is.
It's not a silver bullet, and it doesn't necessarily solve a magic boogeyman issue either.
Right. And, there have been things where it's like, okay, well, just say temporary signs are by way of a permit within the building department, but then you need some sort of standard and, can you have repetitive applications? So one person says, well, I'm having it for the Tuesday specials, and that's going to be 30
days.
times a year. Now it's going to be a Friday special, and it's technically a different temporary sign because it's Pasta Tuesday, or what was that? Prince Spaghetti Wednesday, or I
Yes.
forget what it was. So, that's one of the things, and then also another thing is within the bylaw, and this was raised at the last EDC meeting, is illumination of signs, where it's like the bylaw says 30 minutes, and you have even within the same plaza businesses that are open and close later. Well, do you need then granularity to the main business sign up at the street, so that when a store closes at 5:30, their sign on the main sign goes out, but then everything else is illuminated. But these are some of the granularity that is being raised as far as, well, if it's in a commercial business district, should it apply in the same way as, say, out on Upton Street, one of those businesses that then is really isolated, and you want to have it turn off earlier. So I put this on the agenda just to sort of start to get this in our minds as far as talking about the subject and trying to think as far as like what things we feel we could address. I'm encouraging basically once we get past town meeting to basically just have a joint meeting so we can just talk about these things. Because the last thing I want to have happen is all of a sudden someone submit an article and then we're in front for a zoning hearing and we're philosophically just on different pages, and I've relayed, well, all we have to do is basically say town meeting, we know this is a serious issue. Give us 6 months and we'll address it. And I'd be fairly confident that town meeting would support just delaying it for 6 months, because 2/3 is hard. We may have been fairly successful as far as getting articles through, but it doesn't mean that 2/3 is easy. So if there's any sort of appearance that we're not on the same page or have different opinion, I think that town meeting would take the more conservative approach and not vote for something. So following town meeting, at least I'm encouraging that we have some meetings just to sort of talk about, and if we can tick off some of the things that maybe are some of the easier things. I'm not saying any of them are easier, but some have to be easier than others. That maybe we can start making some progress over the next year, because there's other things from a zoning perspective that I think are really important. Tufts, for example, clearly something can and should happen there, that the existing campus overlay and how their property has been zoned for the last 20 years has not really encouraged that development. So that all other zoning efforts shouldn't freeze because we're then just stagnating on figuring out signs. At least that's my own personal opinion. But if we can say, okay, well, we're gradually make improvements, take care of a couple things, maybe at least we can address it. And we at this table have identified that just ignoring the problem from an enforcement standpoint doesn't work. Because then it becomes, legitimately, one business can take it too far, then enforcement action happens, and then you see all these others that are like, oh, well, that didn't bug me so much, but it's hitting the same provision of the zoning bylaw as the others. And you can't treat property owners differently as it relates to signs. You have to go after all of them with enforcement actions. So that's basically...
I wonder if you have to go out and seek out other violations, or whether you enforce based on complaint. So that, you get a complaint about something, you go deal with it, but you don't then go look for that same thing happening on every single sign in the town. We don't have the budget for that.
No, but some of them, especially when they're within the same district, it's once you start enforcing one, you sort of then end up going down. But that's the whole thing is that some of the signs, and if there's a sandwich shop that has just a special of the day there, that they could apply for a temporary sign under the existing bylaw, but that temporary sign can only be for 30 days. So did they then, with that A-frame sign, just for 1 month out of the whole year, they only use that? Or is a sign, the structure, or is it basically if all sign things change, does that content change and does that become a new sign? Our sign is content neutral, and it has to be. There's a case out of Arizona, Gilbert case, that had to do with treating religious uses differently than other commercial uses, and that was identified as unconstitutional. So your bylaw has to be content neutral. So we can't say for the eatery you can have a daily special sign, but for Koopmans you can't have a tool special of
Sale
the day.
of the day.
So it becomes a little bit more challenging.
On granularity, it's a rabbit hole. Keep going to the more you try to do that. I really like the KISS principle. Keep it simple. If there's a principle, I don't care what the sign is talking about. What kind of signs do we want to have out there? What kind of a visual environment do we want to have? And I think that's the approach that I favor, rather than trying to listen to the sandwich shop that they want to say, something.
Right.
And that's why I keep saying we got to think about more about what's the real problem.
Jumping
also-
ahead of it.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I also think you should stay away from trying to micromanage it too, and that, because, and I agree with Bob, is, what is this, allowing temporary signs, if you're gonna allow it for one, you have to allow it for all. But what do you want them to look like? You know, what is the extremes? What is it what you want and what is it you don't want? And just keep it to that type of language.
I mean, do you want something that's going to allow more than we have today within some standard or reason? Or do we want to open it up to say anybody can have one for pretty much any reason, they just have to go pull a permit? And I think that's the extreme, but it can be simple. I think we've spent a lot of time looking at it because it is trying to make it more complex than it is. And I agree as well that there can be simple parts. I think the temporary sign, the way it's defined, the way it sets up for nonprofits as it is, as an event, is already very well defined. And if all we did was allow those that could apply to it to be commercial as well as nonprofit, but kept it within the definition of the use of that temporary sign, that doesn't proliferate it. It keeps it to specific events, like I'm going to have a Labor Day sale, or an annual sidewalk sale during the month of July.
Yeah.
It fits that sort of true event nature.
But how do you separate that from the next event is next Tuesday for my special, and then the next event after that is the following Tuesday, and you know, like Joe said, every day is an event. I definitely don't think a blackboard that gets erased and written with something else on it is a new sign. I think the sign is,
But if it's attached to a building?
And what's wrong with a sign like that? You know,
like which?
a blackboard where you put your daily special on it.
It's a sign.
It's a sign.
It's a sign cluttering up the roadway, and typically these come up along the state highways, you know, the big roads, Worcester Street. And, you know, maybe other people have better vision, and when I'm driving down there, I can't read anything on any of them anyway, so I don't think that they're helping. They're putting more
Distraction.
distractions and whatnot along the road, breaking up the community image without being helpful.
There's a perception that it's this be all end all, that, oh, I gotta have that sidewalk board sign because that is gonna be the one thing that brings one person through my door. And while at times that may be true, to your point, yeah, most people don't see them unless they're walking by them. We don't have very many parts of the districts that are very walkable with good usable sidewalks that people are gonna walk by that sidewalk board sign.
Where I could see those being useful is if we ended up with something like the community, the small, up at the plaza in North Grafton, where you have areas where people could sit and where there might be a cafe
Internal.
type thing. Yeah, internal in the walking
To the
area.
plaza, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
place
right there.
where I think they make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If we had a classic Main Street where there was parking coming in and people walked up and we had a lot of shops and stuff in there, that's a different kind of thing where people say it's Northampton, or someplace like that, where there's a lot more foot traffic
Right.
in an area. I think they're very, very nice that way. That's where, but we don't actually have that in town anywhere. At
Not
least,
much.
One little pocket in North Grafton,
yeah, and that's about it.
the rest are all setback plazas in most
Yeah.
cases.
I think one class of problem that's, you know, somewhat trying to be attacked through using temporary signs, but maybe it's a little different problem. We have a number of properties along our main drag that have a lot of businesses in a small space, and they don't have, the rules don't currently have a way for them to all have signs. Maybe we ought to look at,
As big of a sign as they want.
well, any sign at all for that matter, except maybe over the store itself, you know. We ought to be looking at better ways, better kinds of signage to handle that type of properties. Those are the ones that I see, I've heard from. The big Koopmans has enough sign,
Yeah.
and they have enough land to do what they want. But across the road, down a little bit, there's half a dozen or 8 things, or even
Still,
more in a building,
coffee
and
shop place, yeah.
the sign bylaw now doesn't really have a good way to handle that kind of need. And having lots of little businesses is a good thing. But I'm not sure that all those little businesses need to be able to have flashing signs about today's special. More, they need to be who they are, so we can find them in just a little bit.
Some of that is the landlords of those buildings, though, that they're designating based on the tenancy and the amount of space that's being leased as to whether you do or do not get a sign. If they decide to cover up their property to an extent that presents more than they have real estate for signage, then they're either making smaller signs to list them all like a law firm, or
Yeah,
not.
yeah, but that's a part of it that I think we can try to look at, maybe even try to quantify a little bit as to what our actual problem is. There are this property, that property, and that one that have this problem, and is it because of the landlord? Is it because they only have 12 square feet allowed for the whole place? Or, whatever it is.
Right. Get to the root of the problem instead of masking it with something else.
Right.
Attempting to be a solution to it.
Simplifying rather than complicating.
Agreed.
So, have we beaten it enough yet?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just be able to plant that seed to, especially as you start driving around and thinking about having a discussion in, say, a month and a half, 2 months, as far as what are some of the problems that we can sort of see, and what might be some things that we can start ticking things off, because, and I just have up on the screen just our existing bylaw about temporary and portable signs, and basically, we end up right in here where temporary signs and portable signs permitted under this bylaw shall be displayed no earlier than 30 days prior to and no later than 7 days after an event for which sign is intended to address. Such sign shall not be erected or displayed so as to endanger public safety. That last sentence is easy. That we're easily able to identify a sign that's like that. It becomes a question as far as then that temporary and portable is really, that's about an event. That's a going out of business sale. That's a Cinco de Mayo thing. It's an event. And one of the things, especially with John, and I think this is where the EDC was coming, is that I think there's always attempts from some of the businesses in town to identify how they can improve visibility and things like that. We're trying to support through the shop Grafton, coming up and by posting things on the website. Coming up, I think I forget the exact date. It might be May. John's coordinating another sort of like educational event as far as like marketing your business like online and things like that. We're trying to do some things a little bit more creatively to see how can we support existing businesses. But I know from talking to some of the businesses and those businesses talking to John, they sort of view like them putting a sign up front is like a little A-frame is like, that's how I'm going to get the next customer in the door. And I agree, just because that's not going to drive me. But that's, I think the perception is doing something. And, what is that appropriate level? We have the existing bylaw. We're able to to look at other communities for examples, you know, and even look at, because I totally agree with you, Linda. Up at the common where people are walking, that's one thing. But when you're driving on Worcester Street, you can't really see it. And
In
they
fact,
just
you shouldn't be looking at it.
true.
Exactly.
But as we know from a couple years ago, when all these shark fin signs proliferated at Stop and Shop, you know, that I wouldn't say Stop and Shop's revenue went up drastically when that happened, because you know we know that business is there, but there is that perception that that's being used to attract, and how can we support in other ways? That's what we're trying to do in the office with economic development, but looking to see is there something that maybe some other towns have allowed for, or with some of these things that then we can provide you know some comparison for other boards and the planning board to consider as we evaluate some of these.
Might be interesting for us to have actual in-place places we can go and look, like Town X, and go look at such and such. They're, you know, they're bad, or they're what we'd like to be, and how's that happening? That might be a bit of a help. I had another thought. I guess if I'm one of those businesses, I'm gonna forever be trying to find the next thing I can do to bring in more business. So I need more sign.
And now you need balloons too. You
Yep.
need balloons.
I mean,
Oh, well, balloons, but that's, I think that's a sign under our,
it's the law of inches. I mean, you give up one, they'll ask for the next one, and I think that's everything's going to be the next inch. Is that they're asking for quite the next thing that can be further expanding, and some of it is just a race of, well, if I can get something permitted and then I can be the first one to do it before my competitors or somebody else does it, then I will get noticed for a week.
Yeah.
And then it'll be drowned out amongst the others. I mean, there's at least 3 businesses using shark fins right now. And you can pass them on the way here. And it's those sorts of things where it's beyond that. I will put forward one potential simple fix, or that could expand, related to the timing, the 30-minute issue. I think that disproportionately impacts certain businesses, especially in the winter months when it gets darker earlier, and lighting and certainly matters. So like a daytime business that shuts down at 5 p.m. Is out at 5 p.m. and all of a sudden it's dark while it's already dark, versus getting a little bit of that PM commute traffic.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's something that could be driven off of that time period so that it adjusts seasonally of some sort, so that it gives a little bit more visibility to those businesses, even when they're closed during commute hours when it's dark, but still follows a pattern.
Yeah. And one of the things, just because we talk about businesses being closed, some will make the argument that, well, we're never really closed. We have an ATM, and we need to be able to have lighting around that ATM, because people will go there all types of nights, at time of the day and night, and therefore we need to have the main sign on for that reason. So
lighting around the ATM is one thing. A sign is a different thing.
Correct.
Yeah, I think we
Security
faced that
lighting,
before.
or a directory signage of some sort where ATM is this way, is one thing. Yeah, to the point where you're advertising the entire business, which is not open. I mean, just because you buy a robot doesn't make you immune to the sign bylaw.
I think whatever bylaw you come up with for signs, you should include businesses as part of the discussion, because that's how they make their money.
They're welcome to come to any planning board meeting.
and
And
that's
we've
where
done
for
that
the-
before. I think before you were on the board, we had, I keep alluding to inviting everybody in to come, and we got a smattering, about 6 or 8 different people, and every one of them had a totally different
use
problem.
case. Yeah.
Right.
And that's where, at the last EDC meeting, when they did start talking about this, they did have businesses there, and I'd expect that when we, should we get together and have a larger meeting just to talk about things, that we would have people from the business community in the audience.
Well, it's gonna help me the sooner we do that, because I keep trying to figure out what the problem is.
Right.
Or, you know, focus, figure out how to focus more. And so days, weeks, months that go by prior to that are just lost time in many
Yeah.
ways. Okay. Is there anything else that can legally come before us?
Plenty of stuff illegally. Sorry.
I didn't
No.
ask about illegal. We'll work on the illegal in a little while.
Hearing no response to that question, I will move to adjourn.
Seconded.
Moved in second and not debatable. All in favor, aye. Opposed?